What started out as 68 teams is now down to 4. Bittersweet, because that means we are going to be treated to an incredible Final Four down in Tampa. But that means that we are this close to the end of the women's college basketball season. But it's not over just yet. I promise you I will be joined by some friends in just a moment. Welcome into the wrap-up presented by AT&T. All right, we're going to get to everything women's college basketball from over the weekend as we get you set for what I just noted will be an incredible Final Four down in Tampa. And this last weekend, we were treated to some great Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups. UCLA ultimately getting it done against LSU. UConn knocking off USC. South Carolina, the two-time defending champs, in a close one against Duke. And then you had Texas in a showdown against TCU. Longhorns knocking off the Horned Frogs to advance to that Final Four. And arguably the four best teams playing basketball right now are still in the mix. I told you, I promised you there would be friends joining me now virtually. Monica McNutt and Charlie Creme. Guys, let's break it all down over the next 30 minutes, what we can anticipate this upcoming weekend, and look back a little bit at what we saw this last weekend. Monica, I'll start with you, and we'll start with South Carolina because at the end of the day, they are the two-time defending champs. If you want to be the best, you have to beat the best, and that's really what they've been the last handful of years. This weekend, though, they were put to the test. Their win over Maryland, their win over Duke, both of them by just 4 points. Ultimately, though, how did the Gamecocks get it done?
Well, I think, Taylor, it is a reliance on their maturity as a squad. You look at the 3 seniors, the 4 juniors, even when you talk about Malaysia Fawili, who is a sophomore, but there's experience there. And so I think that they were comfortable in uncomfortable situations because they knew down the stretch they have the requisite scar tissue, if I may, even though they are champions in their own right, to perform in the clutch. And so I think when you look at it, them being down by 2 points combined in the matchups between Indiana and Maryland, they're like, look, we're not the team of yesteryear in terms of running away with it by crushing teams with our offense. We're a team that has to fight for it on both ends of the floor. But they were comfortable, and ultimately their maturity prevailed as they were able to advance to the Final Four.
And Charlie, you noticed a trend with the post play, especially in their win over Duke. Why is that so important for the Gamecocks moving forward?
Yeah, Taylor, one of the things with South Carolina, and Monica kind of alluded to it, is their ability to pivot in the moment to the strength that's going to be best applied in that particular game. And points in the paint or presence in the paint was really that against Duke. They scored a point per possession when they got the ball into the paint and shot 17% better when those possessions hit the paint. Sanaya Fagan became a post-up force, really, in that game, something we haven't necessarily seen from her all season long. And their steady Eddie has been Chloe Kitts most of the season and certainly in the NCAA tournament, and she delivered as well. Without those two and their presence in the paint, I'm not sure we're even talking about South Carolina right now, but they found a way, and the way was getting the ball inside.
Yeah, Fagan was big, and Chloe Kitts in crunch time in that second half of play was big for the Gamecocks. Look, we've just noted the Gamecocks this season aren't without their flaws, but that's okay. They can still very much win a national championship. Monica, though, what has to be the focus if they want to go down to Tampa and raise that trophy once again?
Well, they obviously have history with the Texas team who's on their side of the bracket. And so to me, I think they have to start sharp when you talk about it, Taylor. And mind you, I totally hold space for the fact that I'm about to point out that they had 12 and 18 turnovers respectively, but also went on to win those matchups versus Maryland and versus Indiana. However, when you're trying to get back to the top, right, like you limit the self-inflicted errors, and turnovers are an area in which I think that they can be a little bit better. Also, in general, I think sometimes it's a double-edged sword because they are certainly confident in their requisite experience, but sometimes I do feel like they forget who they are almost when teams come out with their first punch. And so I just think there's a level of preparation that they can step it up as now they've got 2 games to go before potentially being back-to-back champs.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I have a feeling Dawn Staley has plenty of time this week to have this South Carolina team remembering exactly who they are before they head down to Florida. Okay, pushing it forward because it's going to be round not 1, 2, 3, but round 4 against Texas, as you've alluded to, because they are SEC foes. They met in the SEC championship game. South Carolina did go 2-1 against the Longhorns this season, so Longhorns did get them once. In fact, the other 3 teams in the Final Four, the only teams to beat South Carolina this season, as fate would have it. Monica, let's go back to you, though. In this matchup, does Texas have the blueprint, they've done it before, to do it again against the Gamecocks this weekend?
Well, I would say so, Taylor. I mean, they were able to space the floor in that matchup that they were victorious over the Gamecocks. But even also, I would add that you can take a page out of the matchup versus Duke. To hold this team under 65 points while they are not sort of the Gamecocks of old with the high-powered offense, that's still impressive defense. And so when you look at Rory Harmon, you look at Madison Booker, who obviously had a tremendous year in the SEC, and even the way that Kyla Odarky played in their matchup to get to the Final Four, they have pieces that can slow the game and pester South Carolina defensively, right? I think if you control the pace of the game, if you get to the defensive glass and you limit their second chance opportunities, then you set yourself up to make them play a little bit more in the half court. They are capable of highlight plays, don't get me wrong, but I think they are a little bit more uncomfortable when they have to sit and deliberately execute with a team as sound defensively.
Yeah, try to make South Carolina uncomfortable. Charlie, I was just sitting here laughing before we started the show because we did our bracketology show a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking about all these 1 seeds, and we sat there and we were like, are we underestimating Texas as a 1 seed? Like, they only have a 1 next to their name and had an incredible season year 1 in the SEC. What have you seen out of the Longhorns in this run in the NCAA tournament that has you believing they could potentially win it all?
Well, Taylor, also in that show, I talked about how I'd been maybe overly critical of Texas during the course of the season because they don't shoot three-pointers. They don't make a lot of them. It's just not a part of their offense. And we kind of refer to the today's basketball is you really have to be able to knock down shots to come back in games, to have big possessions late in games. And Texas just doesn't do that. But defense. Vic Schaefer's teams are just unbelievable defensive teams. And I think they've actually gotten better in the tournament. I find this somewhat humorous, actually. You know the team that scored the most points against Texas in the tournament so far? It's William and Mary in the first round.
Wow.
Nobody else has even hit 60 against the Longhorns. That's how they've done it. And they did do it against South Carolina, certainly in the game they won, but even in the 2 other matchups that they lost, it wasn't as if South Carolina ran away with Texas from Texas offensively. It was that Texas struggled offensively. So the Texas defense is a mainstay. It's a steady. It's something they can rely on. And as I said, I think it's even gotten better in March. And if they're going to win a national championship, it's going to be on the backs of the defense.
And part of the reason why they're here, even in this position right now, first Final Four since 2003, is because of their head coach in Vic Schaefer and what he's been able to do. He's become just the 5th head coach to lead multiple programs to the NCAA tournament, did it with Mississippi State, and now he has Texas right back in the spotlight where a lot of people feel like they belong. Charlie, what do you make of the job Coach Schaefer has done there in Austin?
It really is remarkable. And I harken back to 2017 when he was the head coach of Mississippi State at the Final Four, where they upset an undefeated UConn team in the national semifinals. I remember sitting courtside and watching him as almost a puppet master, orchestrating on the sidelines every movement every player on his team made defensively. It was artwork as far as I was concerned. And the energy he put into that game, he was up, he was running, he was yelling, and everybody on the floor listened to every single instruction he was given. And every move that was made was the right move defensively to shut down that high-powered UConn team. He's that good of a defensive coach and a defensive mind. And I can't say enough about what he's been able to do first at Mississippi State. Well, actually, let's go back. Texas A&M, when he was an assistant, they won a national championship when he was an assistant in 2011 to Gary Blair, basically because he was the defensive coordinator and they were a very good defensive team. Then he gets to Mississippi State, completely turns the program around almost immediately, gets to 2 championship games, leaves there, comes to Texas, and this is the best Texas has been in about 30 years now that Vic Schaefer is in charge of the program.
Yeah. They don't say defense wins championships for nothing. And I loved what Coach Schaefer said after the game. And he was like, I know I'm not my players' world, but they're mine. And you saw the raw emotion on his face. He loves this basketball team, and they're hoping to win it all this year. Other Final Four matchup You know, those underdogs, man, those UConn Huskies coming in as a 2 seed, just making another run at the Final Four, 24th most ever all time. Monica, of the 4 teams left standing, where do you rank the Huskies right now?
Oh, man, Taylor. I think that they are I'm going to put them second behind South Carolina. And that one for me is jockeying in position, because I do think that the Huskies, they've definitely been the highest scoring team to punch into the Final Four so far. So I think that they're clicking on both cylinders. I don't know that they have been tested as much defensively. Obviously, the loss of Juju Watkins changed the tenor of that game. I don't know if it changed the outcome, but I think it would have been a little bit different if she was on the floor. But the Huskies are rolling. Look, this version of Paige Bueckers, who is an assertive and aggressive scorer, that is a dynamic shift for this Husky squad. And of course, Sarah Strong also joining the likes of Maya Moore in terms of her freshman scoring record, AZ Fudd back in the tournament and playing terrific basketball, and then their presence in the paint. They've demonstrated a level of patience, and they've shown they've been here before in terms of getting to finals games and playing deep into March, and now technically we're into April, and so they look poised for sure.
Yeah, you feel that poise on the floor when Paige Bueckers is out there. She brings that level of consistency and calmness for the UConn Huskies. You just mentioned the name Sarah Strong. Charlie, this freshman has not been playing like a freshman at all. She looks like an old head who's been in this situation before, and she is not. She's had a double-double in 3 of her 4 NCAA tournament games so far. How does she factor in, though, moving forward for UConn? Because up next, they have UCLA, and Lauren Betts, the best big in the country.
Yeah, exactly, Taylor. And Paige Bueckers has been amazing. But I think you could make a strong argument that Sarah Strong is UConn's most important player. And I think you saw it a little bit last night against USC. She got them off to a good start offensively, made a couple of shots early to kind of set the tone. And then defensively, UConn doesn't really have an inside presence defensively. She has become it, and she shut down Kiki Irifen in that game last night. Irifen only shot 3 of 15 from the field, and with Juju Watkins out, Kiki was USC's main focus offensively, and Strong shut her down. Now, the job gets, I think, that much harder when she's going up against Lauren Betts. And this is where I get a little concerned for UConn. I think the one kind of weakness that they have is that interior defense. And I think, what if Betts gets Strong in foul trouble? Then where does UConn go offensively inside without Strong? She's so important to their offense, both as an inside presence and as a shooter. So that's why I said at the beginning, I think there's an argument to be made that Strong is actually UConn's most important player, if not their best player.
Charlie, I just asked this to Monica as well, and she said she'd put UConn number 2, but really even that could be a coin toss at this point with South Carolina. It's a fluid situation at this point. Where do you rank the Huskies, Charlie? Are they the favorites in your eyes at the way that they're playing?
I have them as my number 1 ranked team here in the Final Four. I think they are playing the best. They have the most experience from a coaching standpoint. Now, obviously, South Carolina has a ton of it, too, with Dawn Staley in the Final Four, but no one has more Final Four experience than Gino Auriemma and his staff. And, I mean, this is Paige Bueckers' 4th Final Four. And their offense is just clicking at a level that we haven't seen. At times during the season, I wondered about all of their offensive numbers, which were amongst the best, if not the best in the country, efficiency and scoring margin, if it wasn't a byproduct of them playing in a weaker Big East. But then you see them get in the NCAA tournament, and the opponent hasn't even mattered. USC is a very good defensive team. Oklahoma isn't necessarily known for their defense, but what they did to Oklahoma was a work of art, the way UConn played offense. They've been just so good. They're so efficient. They know where they want to get the shots, and they execute the ability to get those shots better than certainly anybody left in this Final Four and really anybody in the country all year.
UConn's laughing right now, saying, haha, you thought what? You thought what league we play in doesn't really matter. We're going to bring it against anybody we face on the floor. Looking ahead to their opponent in UCLA, Monica, they're in the Final Four for the first time in program history, first year for them in the Big Ten. How can this UCLA team win it all? Why could they potentially be poised to get it done?
Well, I'll echo what Charlie said. You start with Lauren Betts as your centerpiece. I mean, she's so dynamic offensively and defensively, player of the year in the Big Ten Conference. I just think historically, while the tournament tends to be driven by guard play, in the women's game, we have seen how impactful dynamic bigs can be on both ends of the floor. And I loved some of the recaps coming out of their Elite Eight win to advance to the Final Four. Betts and Rice both talked about their maturity from this year compared to last year, and how they were able to weather the challenges presented by LSU, regroup, and get back to business in terms of advancing the ball game. But as much as you talk about those two, you got to look at Gabriela Jaquez as well, who had 18 points in that matchup. And I just think, and maybe it's me, guys. Maybe it's me rooting for more names in the history books in women's sports. Like, I just think that this group has been close, but not close enough. And I feel like there's something cooking with the Bruins. Like, it doesn't have to be all driven by experience, even though that is what we see historically, until somebody proves that they don't necessarily need the experience to show up.
Some might say there's something brewing with the Bruins. You know what I mean? It's early here on a Tuesday morning. Charlie, following up on that, what did you see in their win over LSU? Look, Lauren Betts didn't even play in the second quarter because she was in foul trouble, and yet here the Bruins are, going to the Final Four. How'd they get this one done?
Well, and some might say, Monica, that they've been Corey close, right?
Hey, we on a roll today. I love it.
No, Taylor, they got it done without. I think that was probably the best sign for UCLA, that they were able to get it done with Lauren Betts having to sit so much. I think from a confidence standpoint, going into the Final Four, they know that if she has to sit, whether it's foul trouble or maybe just whatever the matchups on the floor happen to be, and Corey Close does put Betts on the bench for a bit, that they can still succeed. That second quarter was probably the biggest 10 minutes of UCLA's season. It propelled them to the win over LSU. And you see Gabriela Jaquez, they're knocking down a three. Tamia Gardner knocked down 5 of them in the game. 9 of 13 in an Elite Eight game from three-point range for a team is maybe asking too much, and they still delivered that. And if they can deliver that going forward, and they get out of Lauren Betts what they typically get, and she can stay on the floor, then I think there's a really good chance that UCLA is no longer close, that they're actually cutting down the nets.
On that same note, Kiki Rice, because you just mentioned her name, Monica. Look, she's the team's second leading scorer, but she's made just 4 baskets over the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. How else has she impacted the game as a veteran and a leader on this squad?
I mean, listen, she is delivering dimes, okay? You see the graphic that's also on our screen? 69%. That's what the Bruins are shooting off of her passes. She's got incredible court vision. She's got terrific size. She's a willing defender as well. And so I think part of the beauty of this group, and we just talked about it a little bit with South Carolina, there is so much power in not pressing, right? When you can rely on a mature group that is, to a degree, going to allow the game to come to them as opposed to forcing a round peg into a square hole, or so to speak, there is success in that. And I think that's what we've seen from UCLA in terms of the formula. You know, Kiki is a fellow Washington metropolitan area native, so we had a chance to see her in high school. Thrilled for her. But I think what you saw from her in high school and what you can continue to see from her in this tournament is a great feel for the game, right? She's not going to force it. Her team has been able to be successful. She's been able to set up her team for tremendous success by dishing the rock and participating on the defensive side of the basketball.
Yeah, UCLA has been a really fun team to watch, and it's great to see them on the big stage for the first time in program history. We do not have to wait very long to watch some more women's basketball coming up this weekend. It all starts on Friday with that 4th showdown between Texas and South Carolina, 7 o'clock on ESPN. And then at 9 o'clock, you got UConn and UCLA. Just sit down, relax, and enjoy the show because it's going to be great. I guarantee it, no matter which way you spin it. So that brings us to our next segment. Let's take a look at the guarantee presented by AT&T. We're going to talk about the Final Four, of course, in Tampa. What do you guarantee might happen? And for the people at home, this is just us predicting what could be guaranteed, so take it at face value, if you will. Monica, we'll start with you. What's your guarantee for this weekend down in Florida?
My initial thought when we were posed this question, Taryn and Charlie, is I just want to guarantee that it's going to be sold out and it's going to be popping. down in Tampa. Look, the Final Four the last couple of years has been so cool to be a part of. The energy is undeniable. Obviously, the sponsorship money, the stars of these players rising and getting bigger and bigger. And I just think this year we're going to continue to see that trend upward. You've got 4 dynamic brand names that are going to be down there. We've got the women's basketball game being discussed in a way with depth, I must add, I don't know that it has been discussed in terms of mainstream conversation. There's so much to come and be a part of, and not to mention, Tampa's a great city. The weather's going to be great. The vibes are going to be great. I guarantee it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, everyone who's in a cold weather city, cough, cough, UConn, go down there and get some sun because there's nothing like it when you've been in hibernation for the last several months. Okay, Charlie, what do you guarantee this weekend in Tampa?
Taylor, I guarantee that Paige Bueckers is the best player at the Final Four. She's been the best player in the tournament so far, so maybe I'm not necessarily going out on a huge limb there, but she's been that good. She's that efficient. She's, frankly, a joy to watch for anybody who's just a hardcore basketball fan because she does everything fundamentally so well. If she can make a few more free throws, she's got a chance to be a 50% field goal shooter, a 40% three-point shooter, and a 90% free throw shooter, and also being second in the country right now in assist-to-turnover ratio. So you kind of see what I mean when I'm talking about efficiency. If she is the best player in the Final Four, then I think that benefits UConn greatly, and I think they will win the national championship if that's the case.
Yeah, Paige Bueckers navigating some uncharted territory right now with the numbers she's putting up. I'm going to piggyback off of that. And Monica, you can respond to this as well. I'm sticking with the Paige Bueckers theme. She set the record at UConn for 3 straight at least 30-point games. She's done it twice in her career. I guarantee she breaks her own program record and goes for her 4th straight 30-plus point game, and it's going to all be in the NCAA tournament, which is crazy. She dropped 34 against South Dakota State, 40 against Oklahoma, which was an incredible performance, 31 against USC. She's just playing at a different level, as we've alluded to, and for her, the way she speaks in her post-game press conferences, her pre-game press conferences, it's not about Paige. She is playing for the name on her chest. She is playing for her teammates, and she's playing different than she has. It just feels different. Like there's been a weight lifted off of her shoulders and she's just hooping a little bit. So that's my guarantee. 4th straight 30-plus performance. Monica, you in, you out?
I like it. I like it, Taylor. Look, I think we've heard so much from Gino gently and kind of blatantly, like she's got to be aggressive. She's got to look to score the basketball, and that is what is unlocking this late season success for the Huskies. So I like that as a guarantee. I don't think that's really jumping out on too thin a branch, so to speak.
Yeah, okay, so maybe some of our guarantees are pretty much guaranteed. Like, we weren't willing to go way off the deep end, but hey, we'll see what happens this upcoming weekend in the Final Four. Last night was crazy, not because we had some great women's hoops, but we also had some breaking news. So that has us rethinking possibilities, presented by Invesco QQQ. I looked down at my phone and the scream I scrumped just because I was not expecting to see this last night. Notre Dame star guard Olivia Miles, projected to be the number 2 overall pick in this year's WNBA draft, has decided instead to forego the draft at this point and enter her name into the transfer portal. Monica, what do you make of this news?
Okay, a lot went through my mind on this,
yes.
Only because I have been privy, at least the last couple of years, maybe there's an update that I don't know, about Olivia's relationship with Niele, right? And to my knowledge, they were close. So this was a little bit confusing to me, but sometimes fit is not necessarily about liking. It's about the opportunity to go and add to your repertoire before she takes a big leap to go to the pros. So I guess the only thing that I have on this, really, guys, as a silver lining is just because you go into the transfer portal doesn't mean you actually are going to transfer.
Right.
But I'm really curious to see how this one plans out. But in the NIL space, like, I get taking your time to become the best version of yourself before you step into the pros.
Yeah, and try to make a little money while you're doing it. Charlie, what do you feel about this potential move, and what factored into this decision for Olivia Miles, in your opinion?
Well, I think, and Monica just alluded to with NIL, there's so many factors. Is it, I just need a new environment But sometimes players, kids at the college level, they just feel like, hey, I need to try something new. I have the ability for a new experience, so let me take advantage of that leverage while I have it. Maybe she just wants to look around and say, hey, is there a little bit more money out there in NIL that I can get if I go somewhere else? And it also might be, in terms of the draft, I know she talked about maybe needing a little bit of a break, and the ankle injuries she suffered in the regionals really kind of, I think, weighed on her a little bit. And if she goes right into the WNBA situation, that she's not going to have a chance to necessarily heal up. I have to think all of those things were flowing through her mind. I was a little surprised with the decision to forego the draft and then enter the transfer portal. But I also look at it like this. Early in the season, in the preseason, I made kind of the comments, or I wrote a little bit about, I wonder how the chemistry between Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles is going to work out. Then they started playing, and I felt foolish because it looked tremendous. They played so well together. But I think at the end of the season, we saw that it wasn't quite the same. Something was amiss with their on-court chemistry. So maybe that went into Miles' decision, too. She said, you know what? If I can go and be the singular point guard in another program, maybe that's even better for me for my continued development. So I think all of those things are probably going into the decision to enter the transfer portal. And as Monica said, it doesn't make it a done deal, but it is an interesting one for sure. We'll
eventually find out what's next for Olivia Miles, and hopefully we'll hear from her as to why she's making the decisions she are. But, they will be the best for her moving forward. Charlie, any idea on where Olivia Miles might land?
Oh, I mean, I really don't have any sort of inside info, but you look around the landscape, and we just saw a team in TCU lose last night and end their season. We also know that they're going to be losing a whole bunch of players. And we also know that Mark Campbell has no problem building a program around transfers. That's what he just did for the big turnaround at TCU. So you just kind of add those things together, and you work logic from there. Could TCU be a destination for Miles? She would have sort of the run of the floor. He's a very player-friendly coach. So she would be able to operate in the way that she certainly wants to operate. Not that Neil Avi is not a player-friendly coach. I'm certainly not suggesting that. But it's in a new situation with a fresh environment that, this is a guess, really. But I'm only taking the pieces that we've seen in recent history and saying, could TCU be the place? I don't know, but I think it's logical to say that it maybe. Yeah, Olivia could pick up the phone and potentially call someone named Haley Van Lith and say, hey, how did your experience go? And I think it would be rave reviews from HBL. Monica, you feel like there's a fit around the country for Olivia Miles and what it says, bigger picture about women's college basketball right now?
I honestly, as we sit here today, I cannot think of a better fit than TCU potentially, because that is a marquee point guard that is moving on.
Yeah.
I wonder about an LSU. Like, I wonder if that's at all in the cards. I'm not jumping off the page vouching for that. But if we're talking about this thing being attached to NIL opportunities, we know, I watched the Money Game. I watched the documentary when it comes to LSU. So I just wonder about that one a little bit. And then you think about the position that she's going to go on to play at the next level. Obviously, she'll still continue to be a point guard. The other teams in the Final Four, you got to think about it, right? Like, in terms of places that have sent pros consistently to go on to the next level. So those are just thoughts that come to my mind. I don't know anything on this one. I'm curious to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting watch. Tania Latson, the nation's leading scorer, also in the transfer portal from Florida State. You got a couple of big names, Cody McMahon, the forward from Ohio State. Cody. So a lot of the pieces are going to fit the puzzle here over the next couple of weeks as we wrap up this season. All right, weekend look back for the teams that aren't going to be playing in the Final Four. There are some players that need to be talked about and remembered. One of those from LSU is Anissa Morrow. How will you remember her, Monica, and the impact she had collegiately?
So look, I'm a Georgetown girl. Anissa Morrow originally was a DePaul student athlete before she transferred to LSU. She has always been a stat stuffer. Like, I can remember my friends on the Georgetown coaching staff at the time being like, she's a problem. And this was before she sort of got to her national prominence. I will remember her as an effective, undersized beast.
And everyone better remember that it's Anissa Morrow. So just so everyone notes that. Sticking with the Tigers, Flau'jae Johnson, who's just an incredible player and personality, Charlie, she had a great NCAA tournament too.
Yeah, coming off that eye injury against NC State where she almost went full Rocky on the training staff and said, just pry my eye open so I can keep playing. But then coming back and having the game that she had, the 28 points she had in the Elite Eight against LSU, the big 24 in the second half that really kind of kept the LSU in the game. She's another decision to be waited on, right? She could come back and play another year. And now that Monica's mentioned LSU and Olivia Miles, it's got me really thinking about Miles and Johnson together on the same court.
I'm saying, Charlie.
People are watching this at home taking notes. They're just saying.
I'm just saying.
It could be a lot of fun to watch. We know how LSU does down there. Okay, team as a whole, though, Duke Blue Devils. Look, what Kara Lawson has built there from the worst team in the ACC to winning an ACC championship this year. They made a run all the way to the Elite Eight. What do you project in the future for this Blue Devil team and how this season can impact them moving forward, Monica?
Well, first of all, tip of the cap to Kara Lawson. You mentioned the turnaround, Taylor. I think the ACC tournament run, I was like, yo, what's happening here? And so to that end, I think she has established a culture that is appealing, right? Duke basketball at large is a brand. We know the men's team is in the Final Four. They probably have a really good chance to win a championship. And so I think it's really cool when you can have that much symmetry on a campus. As far as Kara Lawson is concerned and the relationship that she is building with her players, I, for one, am one that was energized by the many clips that have come out of sound bites from their practices and such. So I just think when I look at Duke, it is, for me, it's a sweet reemergence, because I can remember following college basketball when Duke was one of the names often mentioned in women's college basketball. So it's been really cool to see that program get back up.
It's great to have those names at the top. And Reagan Richardson, the only one on that team out of eligibility. Everybody else, if things don't go crazy in the transfer portal, will be returning to Durham. So you can consider them a favorite in the Atlantic Coast Conference next year. Hey, Tampa's coming up next, which will be so exciting with the Final Four starting this Friday. For Monica McNutt, Charlie Creme, I am Taylor Tannebaum. Thank you so much for watching the wrap-up presented by AT&T. We'll see you down from sunny South Florida.